my name is Gabby and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here then welcome to my channel, and today's video is going to be my February 2025 reading wrap-up. I read 16 manga volumes, started 2 other manga series that don't have volumes yet, read 2 books, listened to 4 audiobooks, and then we also do have the usual manga chapters from the series that I am caught up to and reading as they update, which is a shocking amount to be talking about today, especially for another month that I was sick during. But you know, we have Valentine's Day, we have Black History Month, we had the K-manga ticket expiration system, which there will be a lot more on that later. So at the same time, I do see how I got to this point that I am at today, and yeah, I will have the content warnings I can find linked down below in the description along with links to some resources, and let's go ahead and get into it. And we are going to start by talking about volumes 4 through 12 and then chapters 94 through 140 of The Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity by Saka Mikami. And The Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity follows a second year in high school who attends Chidori High, which is a boys' school who takes in the boys with the lowest grades, and they are often considered the dregs of society. Especially by the girls next door to them who attend Kikyo Girls High, which is a high school that wealthy and high-class families send their prestigious daughters to. And our main character has an appearance that is often considered scary to other people, but he actually does have a really gentle heart. And while helping out at his family's patisserie, he meets a girl and they hit it off immediately, but things get much more complicated when he realizes that she is a student at Kikyo. And remember when I said I was sick during the intro, this was the main thing that comforted me during that time, of which I am extremely grateful for. I do have a full review of this series that currently exists on my channel, and I'll keep my more in-depth thoughts about this series to that video. But this series just continues to be one of the most adorable, wholesome, and pure things that I have ever read. It is a major light in my life. It also has some of the best romance that I've ever read, and these two have some incredible moments that made me so happy that I almost fully cried. And I will be comparing other romance series to this one for a really long time from this point forward. I also just really love the way that these characters communicate and support one another, both romantically and also within their friend group. There is a lot of love here and a lot of really fun scenes between them. They also dove into the topic of finding your career path, and it led to some really good character growth and exploration, and I suspect that it will continue to do so. And yeah, I said this in my review of this series, but I am very much excited for their future, both when it comes to what is going on in the manga right now and also with their upcoming anime, and this has just quickly become an all-time favorite for me. For sure. Next we have volume 1 of Lycoris Recoil by Spider Lily and Yasunori Bizen, and this takes place in Japan, which is a nation that the government very much wants the average citizen to believe is free of vicious crime and terror. And to accomplish that, they use a secret task force comprised of schoolgirls who are agents known as Lycoris. And Lycoris Recoil follows 2 of these girls, Shizato and Takina. Okay, so this volume was basically just the first few episodes of their anime, but I thought that it fit into manga format extremely well. I like the art style, and the action scenes were still really fun, and so were the interactions between the characters. And this is a series that I watched and loved while it was airing, and I haven't watched this since, so it has been long enough to where revisiting the storyline does feel really nice, and I also just miss these characters so much. And there are also a lot of scenes that I am really excited to eventually get to and see in the manga format. And next we have the audiobook version of Hood Feminism, Notes from the Women That a Movement Forgot by Mikki Kendall, and this is a collection of essays that talks about how mainstream feminism often does have a blind spot when it comes to meeting basic needs, such as food insecurity, access to quality education, safe neighborhoods, a living wage, and medical care, and will instead focus on increasing the privilege of the few rather than the many, and not see things how race, class, sexual orientation, and ability intersect with gender. I have listened to a lot of really amazing nonfiction books over the course of the past year, and this has to be one of the best of the already best. And obviously the importance of the topics in this book cannot be understated always, and that is still very, very much the case in 2025. And it was all presented in a really compelling and engaging way, and it also does have memoir elements to it as well, as the author does draw upon her own experiences. And it is one of those books that I do feel has made my brain more alert, because it does address topics and then explain why they are also specifically a feminist issue as well that mainstream feminism often does ignore, and I do feel my brain is more alert in searching for that in everything than it was before. before listening to this. And I am so grateful for that. Like, this author didn't have to write this book, but she did. She also narrates the audiobook, I believe, and it's one that I cannot recommend enough if you have not read it yet. And next we have the audiobook version of We Deserve Monuments by Jazz Hammonds. And this follows our main character Avery, who is convinced that her senior year is ruined when she is forced to move from DC to her terminally ill grandmother's hostile home. And no matter how much she tries, her mother and grandmother refuse to talk about the past that is causing the tension. As Avery grows closer to her two new friends, the racist opinions and history of the town begin to hint at something insidious underneath, and she has to decide whether digging into that is worth sacrificing the relationships that she has made and come to really care about. This was the second book that I spent a majority of my time with while I was sick, and it was really easy to get invested in this and the characters. I really loved the relationship that these three girls had with one another. There were some really amazing moments, coming of age themes, and just like teenagers stumbling along and being kind of messy. And the family relationships were also super complex, and that felt really interesting and like a good balance of messy, complex, and sweet. And this book does have a mystery element to it as well, with a few different storylines and reveals that get exposed and explored in this way, especially as we dive into the racist history and modern day of this town, and there are some really heartbreaking and infuriating moments. And that also does apply to the romance as well when it comes to homophobia, and the romance also does have like these really beautiful moments of queer joy too. I do think that I could have liked these two a lot more than I ended up liking them, but they had their moments for me for sure, and I really loved those moments. That being said, the ending of this book. I remember getting to the end of this audiobook and being like, oh, so they're just not going to address what I heard them just say. And yeah, no, they certainly did not, and certainly not to the extent that a reveal of such gravity should have gotten. Overall, I do really appreciate what this book did and explored, and it was able to pull a lot of different emotions out of me while also keeping me fully invested. Like, I never felt like I needed a break from this audiobook. I listened to probably 80% of it in one day, went to sleep, woke up the next day, immediately put it on and finished it. But yeah, that final reveal really did throw me off, and I do feel bad that this is like a standout situation between me and this book, but it was a huge reveal. And I ended up giving We Deserve Monuments by Jazz Hammonds 4.25 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert, and this follows our two main characters, Bradley and Celine, who are former best friends and current arch enemies, making petty insults and academic rivalry the only things between them. And when Celine signs up for a survival course in the woods that will help further her career path and success, she's surprised to see Bradley right there next to her, and these two are going to have to learn to work together in order to have a chance at the grand prize. And this brings them closer, and as they start to sort through their history with one another, both the good and the bad, they have to decide whether enough time has passed to form a new relationship with one another. This was so much fun. I went into this book wanting a fun, adorable, enemies to lovers romance with the Talia Hibbert style character growth and exploration, and that is exactly what I got here. And enemies to lovers this very much is. There is a lot of honestly pretty ridiculous and petty banter in here, and this book knows that, which just added to the charm on top of all the already fun comedy that they had going on. And we also do get those character deep dives and growth. For Celine, it is her past trauma and how it affects her present timeline. And for Bradley, it is choosing his career and finding confidence, and we also do get to see how he manages his OCD as well. And I ended up really liking both of these two a lot. They have a lot of heart, and their dynamic together was a good mix of adorable and fun for me. That being said, as much as they do bicker and speak to one another in this book, I would have loved to have seen them communicate better. Like, the lack of communication does make sense because they are young, and it does lead to conflicts, which the book needs, and it led to conflict resolution that I actually really did like, but it was still frustrating to read at times, and I would have also have loved like one more deep conversation between them about one of the main conflicts, because I'm not fully sure that I ever got the resolution that I was personally looking for when it comes to that, but for this book it did make sense. I also think this book had a really strong cast of side characters, both family and friends, and everyone really came to life. And my largest complaint about this book is that we didn't get to see more of them, especially the friends that they met through the survival course, and I did think that we were going to spend a lot more time like camping and exploring than we did. due to like all the camping imagery on and within this book, so even though the pacing did feel fine to me, like I had a great time, but I still feel like this book probably could have been longer just to settle into the story more. So yeah, it's not my favorite Talia Hibbert book, but it's still one that I really enjoyed, and I ended up giving Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next we have volumes 1 through 3 of Penguin and House by Akiho Ieda, and this follows Pen the Penguin, who is not just any ordinary penguin. He loves to dote on his owner by doing things. Things like folding the laundry and making pancakes, but his owner is a lazy university student who barely notices all of his work. So I saw this series on Manga, and yeah, this is actually pretty simple. I saw the penguin and I was like, that's the one! I will be reading this one day. So when I caught up to the Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity and I had Manga tickets that were going to expire if I didn't use them, I threw them right at this and continued to do so until I finished it and also had to switch to points in order to read the final chapters. The way to unlock chapters on Manga is a lot. You either need tickets or points to read certain chapters, and tickets are easier to unlock chapters with, but they do expire pretty fast and are hard to keep up with. But I do end up reading series pretty quickly because of this system, which is nice, but it is also kind of stressful in its own way. But yes, Penguin and House, Pen-chan, adorable, amazing, so talented, and just a joy to read in all ways. I just liked watching him do things, and he does a lot of stuff. Especially for his ungrateful owner, who is pretty annoying. They play it off like he doesn't notice for the comedy. It didn't really work for me. It made this guy pretty hateable, actually. And I want to say that I love this series comedy as a whole, but what was pleasant, and what wasn't, wasn't. There were some pretty solid side characters though that I did like and that were fun. I also did really like the art style. There is heart here, but it is mostly just Pen-chan. He is the heart. And all 3 stars that I'm going to be giving to this series are thanks to him, and also like the 2 college friends that I mentioned, but mostly Pen-chan. Next up is another audiobook, and that is going to be Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. And this follows Yasmin and Josiah Wade, who after being dealt blow after devastating blow by life, have found that love cannot save everything, including their marriage. Yasmin is finally starting to feel joy again, and she and Josiah have fallen into a new rhythm together with their kids and thriving business. However, these two are still drawn to one another and are beginning to wonder whether or not they can truly let it all go. This is a book series that I feel like I see around a lot, and whenever I do see it, I see really good things about it, which is how I ended up here. And it did take me a little bit to get into this, but once I was invested, I was really invested. So much so that when I was listening to the epilogue and the book was clearly ending, it didn't feel real. Like, it felt so weird knowing that I wouldn't be following them anymore. This also had so many genuinely heartbreaking and raw moments of pain and grief. Like, what happened is truly devastating, and it also does have a focus on therapy and mental health as well. There's a lot of joy and beauty here as well, and I loved reading it. And again, I was really attached to and invested in the characters, so listening to this book pulled a lot of different emotions out of me. This is also a second chance romance, so there were some complex dynamics at play, again really impacted by grief and heartbreaking situations and life events. But again, you could really feel just how much hurt is there and how much heart there is there as well. And there were a lot of interactions between them that I really appreciated, and a lot of interactions between like them and their kids that I really liked as well, both individually and together. This is also a spicy romance book, and honestly, especially towards the beginning of this book, some of the comments made by the side characters and also by our main characters did feel really shoehorned into me. Like, it was fully separate conversation happening, but don't you also miss sleeping with your hot ex-husband? Like, it felt like it almost came out of nowhere at times and not always necessary, but also like it was still really fun at the same time. I'm not fully complaining about this. And as the book went on, I liked how this book utilized the spiciness more and more until it stopped feeling shoehorned in altogether. There is also a little bit of a love triangle slash square that I didn't love that I am going to complain about though, because I felt like it dragged for for me, but I also do see why it was there. And I ended up giving Before I Let Go 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I really am looking forward to reading the rest of this series because I do like what I saw from those characters in this book. And I want to get to know them more, and maybe I'll also see these two and their family again, and that includes the dog, by the way. He was very fun. Next is volumes 1 through 3 of Having an Idol-Loving Boyfriend is the Best by Mito Aoi. And this follows our main character Akari and her co-worker Anda, who are both hardcore idol fans and have formed a close friendship over their shared interests and activities. However, one day, Anda randomly confesses his feelings for Akari, and while surprised, she does like the idea of dating somebody who shares her interests, but she is still unsure of how to navigate this new version of their relationship. Okay, so K-Manga has struck again with this one, and this is a series that I started because every day they choose a series that if you read the first chapter of that series, you get 5 points, and you do need a lot of points to read certain chapters and series, and this is also how I found The Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity, so I wasn't not going to try out another romance series. And once I finished Penguin and House, I needed to throw my tickets at something, and I chose this because I did enjoy that first chapter. And I do really like this series. I like that they're both super into idols and support each other's fandom and like go to events together and just have a great time. Like, it was all really cute. Romance-wise, they are very much just stumbling along here, which has led to some really fun moments, but I want to say that like anything amazing has happened yet, but I would say that they are consistently pleasant and just a fun little series. And I probably would have read more than the first 3 volumes this month, but at a certain point, instead of tickets, you need points. And again, you do need a lot of points, and I just do not take in as many points as I use. Like, you do use up points pretty fast, but the good news is that this series will be the only series getting my points from now on. I just won't be truly caught up to anything on K-Manga for a little bit because like the newest chapters do need points before they become free the next week. So I'm just going to wait that week out so I continue to read more of this until I eventually finish it, whenever that may be. Next up, we have Redemptor by Jordan Ifueko, which is the sequel to Raybearer. And Raybearer is a West African fantasy that follows our main character Tarisai, who has been raised in isolation by her mother, who was often absent from her childhood. When she reaches the right age, her mother sends her to the capital to compete with other children for a spot on the Crown Prince's Council. Each council member gets connected to the others through the Ray, which creates a very deep bond between all of the members, and this is a closeness that Tarisai craves. However, her mother made a wish for her to kill the Crown Prince, and she is being compelled to obey. So I had a somewhat recent realization that with Espiritu by Aiden Thomas coming out later this year, I have the opportunity to read sequels to my top 3 books of 2021 in 2025. If I read Espiritu, Mirrored Heavens, and Redemptor. And I am very much interested in doing that because those first books not only saved my reading year that year, but also in a way saved my love for reading just as a whole. So yeah, that brought me to Redemptor, or in this case, back to Redemptor, because I started this book back in 2022. I did a reading vlog for Raybearer, so I wanted to do the same for this one. And then I got sick in the middle of filming that reading vlog, and I just never went back to it, even though I kept telling myself that I was going to go back to that reading vlog, until it became so long that I realized I just needed to trash the vlog and restart this book. And restart the book I did, and I am so happy that I have finally read and finished this book. I miss these characters so much, especially Tarisai. She is one of my favorite characters that I have ever read, and that didn't change at all in this book. In fact, I think it only grew stronger, and I loved getting to follow her again. I also really loved getting to see like our more main side characters again, and I thought this had some really interesting newer characters as well. And this is a series with a lot of characters, and it definitely took me a while to settle back into seeing all of the names and just trying to figure out who they were all over again, since not all of them are that well established, and they don't necessarily need to be either, but they are there. And it was a lot, but I did settle into this pretty quickly here, and I was so immersed and invested in the entire thing. Like, the storyline and all of the fantasy was so captivating. There were so many cool things in here that I loved reading so much. And I also really loved how this book showcased different types of love and explored different class dynamics as well. There's also a focus on mental health here that I really appreciated, and I loved how it tied in with Tarisai's character and her journey and just overall growth. And also, like the first book, it incorporated music and stories in a really amazing way, and I just love this setting and the characters so much. And I ended up giving Redemptor 5 out of 5 stars. Next, we have chapters 1 through 4 of Ichi the Witch by Osamu Nishi and art by Shiro Uzasaki. And this takes place in a world where only women can be witches until one day an unsuspecting boy acquires their power. Which, not gonna lie here, that was not a description that I was interested in when I first saw this series on Shonen Jump. But since then, I feel like I've seen a lot of hype around this series, and who am I to ignore that when it is still very much in reach to be caught up to relatively easily. And I don't think that this series has necessarily gotten me excited for it yet, like Descaras is carrying pretty hard here for me, but I'm also only 4 chapters in. I also really like the art style. It is kind of reminiscent of Witch Hat Atelier for me, which is one of my favorite fantasy art styles ever, and this was also created by Osamu Nishi, who is responsible for Welcome to Demon School Iruma-kun, which is a series that I do really love, so I do have a lot of hope here, but we'll see what the future holds. Next, we have the audiobook version of Burn Down, Rise Up by Vincent Tirado, and this takes place in the Bronx, where there have been sudden, unexplained disappearances for over a year now. And our main character Recoil has been doing her best to ignore all of this until her crush's cousin goes missing and her mom comes down with an illness that seems linked to the disappearances. Recoil and her crush team up to investigate, but they soon realize that everything is connected to a terrifying urban legend. And in order to save their home and everyone that they love, they are going to have to play this game and destroy the evil. I really like the concept of this book and the horror as well. It was properly graphic and disturbing, and it ties into the history of the Bronx as well. Just a really interesting concept all around. It definitely kept me listening to this audiobook. I just had some trouble with the characters in this one, not so much Raquel. I really liked her, and I liked Charlize as well. I actually probably would have liked to have seen more of Charlize, but I feel like I could have used more flashbacks on this friend group to just get a better feel for the relationship and their dynamics in the past and how it impacts the present, because I don't feel like I ever fully grasped the extent of the complexities to their relationships, or even like the heartbreak of the situations that they're in, or even to a certain extent why they're friends in the first place. And other than Raquel, and to an extent Charlize as well, I did really want to get to know everyone better than I feel like I did. And at a certain point, 2 of the guys really started to annoy me, and I feel like if I knew more about them and their relationships like I mentioned earlier, then that would have really helped with that. I also would have loved to have seen more of the romance, so I ended up giving Burn Down, Rise Up 3.5 out of 5 stars. But I think this would make a really cool live action series, especially around the fall. Like, I could see that for this so easily, and I would love to. Next, we have chapters 1 through 16 of Glaxias by Ao Hatesaka, and this takes place in a world where it has been several years since the Dragon King was assassinated. And we follow our main character Gio, who is a human girl who yearns for adventure away from her rural life in the far corner of the kingdom that the dragon folk dwell in. However, when she meets a mysterious man with amnesia, her life turns upside down, and the 2 of them find the ultimate adventure waiting for them. And we are once again back to K-manga. I was first introduced to this series through the read the first chapter, give 5 points thing, and once I no longer needed tickets for having an idol-loving boyfriend is the best, they went to this series. Because I really liked that first chapter. Kind of a lot, and I wasn't expecting to. There are quite a few different shonen series that this reminds me of, so it does feel very nostalgic to me in that sense, and I really like that. They also just have a cool art style that has created a really cool atmosphere, and the magic system and world itself has also been really interesting so far, and I feel like they're doing interesting things with it, and I've just enjoyed traveling with these 2. Like, minus some of like the toilet humor that pops up occasionally, there are some pretty solid comedic moments in this series. Even if it doesn't land all of the time, most of the banter has still been pretty fun. And like I said, they've done some really interesting and surprising things with their story so far. Like, whether this series is actually good or if it's just some weird little series that I for some reason like, I don't know. But this is also another one that I feel like I am starting to see like some rumblings of hype around potentially. But also I genuinely do not know what the future holds for this series, and it's probably still just too new to say. But as of right now, I do hope it's good, but I could also be here within the next few months and they're cancelled and I'm going to be sad, but also like they deserved it. Or I'm going to be here years later and they're hundreds of chapters in with like a successful anime adaptation. I genuinely have no idea which way this is going to go, and only time will tell, I guess. Okay, so it is now time for more manga, specifically the series that I'm caught up to and reading chapters from over on the Shonen Jump app as they update, including chapter 129 of Ruri Dragon, chapters 182 to 185 of Blue Box, chapters 144 to 147 of Akane Banashi, chapters 66 to 69 of Kagurabachi, and chapter 122 of Kaiju number 8. Everyone here was pretty good. I usually do pick a favorite out of these 5, and honestly I'm not very sure if I feel like super strongly about one of them over the others this month. I don't know, maybe Blue Box, I guess. They were pretty fun. And they gave me some content from one of my favorite ships that I have right now, as well as one of my favorite established relationships that I have right now. And I also just had fun with the characters in general. Akane Banashi was also still really good. They started what very much does feel like a fresh and new arc last month, and it felt just as strong this month. Kagurabachi had some fun action scenes and also an exciting reveal. And Kaiju number 8 is basically like fully action right now, which is really good, as it always is with this series. And at this point I'm basically waiting for Ruri Dragon to start a new arc. I haven't really loved this one, but I thought this chapter was fine. Like, I did like it, and I also still like this series. Okay, so that is all that I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and answer a question that'll be around here if you want to do that, and hopefully I will see you here next time. Bye.